therapy and astrology is a place to call whole. Wholeness is where you take your testing times to be initiations and life diplomas, and where you realize how to intervene for yourself in a loving way. Welcome to Therapeutic Astrology Podcast, or in short, TAP. Welcome. So happy that you are stopping by for this first real official episode. My name is Mannah, and I'm not going to keep saying that. That's just going to be annoying in the long run. But I'm a Pisces, and so that's the wholeness, and that's what you see on the logo. And I'm a Pisces in the 8th house. And I got a lot of Sagittarius going on. Yeah, I do. So I want to start out by saying a bit about astrology and therapy. And then we're going into today's topic about the feeling of being wrong, or that something is wrong with me. And then we're going to talk about Pluto and Scorpio. And that's also the 8th house. So yeah, let's get to it. I've been combining the words for many years, not 20 years, okay, but like at least 6 years. I've tried to figure out how I should say, like, should I say astrologically informed therapist, or should I say trauma-informed astrologer? Actually, you know what? Before I go further down that road, I should define trauma just quickly. The way that I look at it and the way that I've learned about it is that it is an original heartbreak. So it's something that you're completely helpless to, and you needed to go into a survival mode. And this survival mode came to hide your authentic, natural self, who you really are. You needed to hide it. You needed to cut some part off in order to survive. And it means that we are now, I'm referring to us who's dealing with this sort of thing, and maybe you're in that group too, but so we are recovering from not just what happened, but how we adapted to what happened, because that is what has stayed way into adult life. So the trauma, sometimes, it's spoken about as the actual happening, which is, also fine. It's just like a word that have several meanings, and we are quite used to that in astrology with symbols that have so many layers of meaning. But a big part of the trauma is how we have adapted to it. That's actually the impact and the impression it has left on the character structure. So it can be strategies of, the survival mode can be pleasing others to the detriment of your own needs, and it can be dissociation, jumping out of your body, so you can show up with your body somewhere and follow orders but not feel anything. It can also be to dominate others, so you're not controlled yourself. It can be being the caretaker, always attuning to others so that they will need you and you don't need to feel your own inside. So we're going to dive into strategies in another chapter. But basically there's many ways of escaping yourself. And this knowledge is so valuable as an astrologer. And that is, I am endeavoring to somehow unite distinct ways of knowing to make sense of the world, and it's going to be an even greater world. Do you know what I mean? It's going to be a greater world when we are combining, when we are unifying these perspectives. So what I have landed on is that I am an astrologer that works therapeutically, because then the emphasis is still there on this, we can call it a mystical reality. So I could simply call it trauma-informed astrology, but that might just mean what any evolutionary astrology is about. Because in evolutionary astrology, which is what I practice on its own without the therapy, it is about reading traumas into the chart of the person. So I identify as an evolutionary astrologer, and I'm loving this branch of astrology. But maybe I should define that too, actually. So I don't know who you are yet, so that's why I kind of want an email from you, like, who are you? So tell me what you know, so I'm not gonna bore you with things. But yeah, it's a good idea maybe to define, say a little bit about evolutionary astrology. It's basically the philosophy around past lives being really drawn up into this kind of way of interpreting the chart. That the whole that we are born to evolve our consciousness, and that this process of evolution extends through several lifetimes, and that we carry memories across death. So we carry memories of trauma which has impact the current incarnation, like the circumstances that you're born in is impacted by like the sum of past lives. So that's a general rule, like a general idea behind evolutionary astrology. That's the evolution throughout lifetimes, right? And then for me there's more than that. Well, there's also the therapy. So if I only said that my astrology is trauma informed, it would remind a little bit too much about that kind of astrology in its raw form, but it's really not. It's like I am putting another layer to it. So I do the chart, and then I offer therapy on the basis of that chart. It's not just an evolutionary astrology reading, because I believe that we need to integrate, and I'm very biased, so I'm just gonna say what I believe. I really see the beauty of integrating the astrological revelations that we might have, that we hopefully have throughout a session. Yet I even feel it's too small to formulate like that. Let me see. Okay, so our subjective sense of self, our subjective sense of self is likely to be misled sometimes, and that limits our aliveness, or our capacity to feel aliveness. So I think it is with good reason that a lot of people turn to astrology when they are suffering. In part, I think, to see what's more for me, and of course there's a lot of there's a lot of like what's gonna happen in the future, but also just like astrology can really help when you've lost your way. It can really help when you're like, who am I? What's my life purpose? All of that. That's something astrology can really help with. So, but in therapy is the only, I think, sustaining factor to whatever hopeful message you're gonna get from the reading. So maybe this is completely clear to you already, but I just felt like saying it, and maybe you don't know what I'm talking about. But like if you've been to therapy and you've worked on some issues, right? Then, so that's one part of it. And then if you've been to a reading, then I'm actually not necessarily like in the therapy taking anything up that we've spoken about in the reading, because it's gonna come, it's gonna present itself no matter what. Because what we deal with in therapy, it's gonna be all there in your chart. Anyway, some will say that it cannot be put together, and there is a truth to that. I've spoken to astrologers who are also therapists and who've said, it's too, you can't do it at once. And I reckon that there is some truth to that, because astrology is information, where therapy is relational and more of a shared process in which I'd say that you are more involved with the client in a personal way, involved with the client's personal experience. So you get close in a way, and more than in a reading. So of course a therapy session and a chart reading is not immediately the same, and I'm certainly not one who would want to look at the chart only to talk for hours about the moon in this client's chart, because I mean there's so much meaning to the moon, so you could do that. But I do value real astrological insights where you combine a lot of things and you talk for hours if you have that. I mean, where information is not wasted. So I think it would be wasted if you would only just take, because that would, I mean, the reason that I'm giving this example is because that would be one way of doing it, right? Just you have the chart and you have the therapy session all at once, and you're seeing like, okay, this person, she has the moon in Scorpio, okay, already there, we got so much material right there, so you're just gonna go ahead and combine it like that, and that's what I'm saying I don't do. Okay, I don't do that, because I like the pure astrology too, where we dive in and we combine the symbols and not just take just one piece. I've tried readings like that. I've tried so many readings. I have had so many readings myself, and I'm very grateful for all of those experiences. But I've had readings where I'm like, okay, we only spoke about my fourth house, and that's fine because there's plenty to talk about. But I'm just saying that's not the kind of reading that I'm offering, because I think there's so much more to be said when you combine all of it and you do take it as the true information that it is about you. Okay. We're talking about a great therapeutic potential in astrology. That's really what it is. In that information that astrology is revealing. And I think it's actually revealing an energetic pattern, an energy pattern that is all around us at all times. And to me, therapy is about finding or connecting to that energy pattern, because it does reveal who you are beneath all the defenses, all the layers of trauma responses that might have become most of your personality, your character structure that I said before. So in the chart is read what you truly want, and that is what will heal you. I hope you can see how intertwined it is for me already. Like, you can see in the chat what you need to work on in therapy. But so I do understand people who challenge that it can be combined, but I will argue that in my way of doing it, it can be combined, because I do separate the sessions and do reserve the sessions for each, but it is informed by each other. And it affects, of course, absolutely affects how I see the client, what the chart looks like. So also in therapy. Are there any dangers to astrology for people in dire need of help? I think that is a relevant question as well. Like, if you go to therapy, then maybe you would feel you're more on a safe ground, because if the astrologer says something, right, that's negative? I've heard a lot of people say that. What if it's something negative and I can't get it out of my head? And yeah, I mean, that is a real danger, because but that is really because our overall tendency to surrender our health and well-being to experts rather than the guidance within. And what happens is you now have to live up to those standards of that so-called expert, who very rarely is attuned to the inner state of the client or the person that they are advising anyway. So yes, but no. Actually no. I don't think it's more dangerous than going to a therapist and you're gonna get matches to you and someone who doesn't match to you, and that's the same with any. It's so helpful, because in astrology we take guidance from the cycles of nature and phases in terms of how it affects us and how we affect the phases. And just to keep it real grounded, it's about the placements of the planets, and they can tell us about specific developmental phases within a human life, like in a general lifespan, what is usually happening. And what they share, what therapy and astrology shares actually, is that they're both process oriented, meaning we change over time. And when there's a transit of something and you're like, okay, it's gonna come like the 3rd of April, that's when it's all happening. I mean, maybe, but usually often it's not necessarily on that day, even though the transit hits on that day. And I think that it says a lot about our human life and our way of that something first becomes like an idea, and then you make one choice, and it's a phase that is happening, as far as I'm concerned, with transits, and not necessarily the day. Meaning we change over time, and there is so much to explore in our inner dynamics, because in astrology we see the seeds nature has planted in us, and therapy is part of nourishing and watering those seeds. I mean, ideally life experiences would just ensure growth, but if we didn't get that nourishment or security as children, where loving parents welcomed you into the world exactly the way you are, what we call attuned interactions with caregivers, well, then you don't have a stable foundation for life experiences. Join the club. And we record the history in ourselves. Yeah, I'm going to be speaking to that, because we're going to speak about the feeling of being wrong. So the history of our parents and our environment and the expectations of a society. I mean, a lot of information is absorbed even before we are born. So if our mother is stressed, lives in an emotionally hostile environment herself, babies will receive that. And so it can become this tone, or this constant background noise in us, this feeling of what is wrong with us. I know, in my adult years here, I've had this question. I've asked this question for so long, and even doing a lot of interviews with people about their healing methods, been like people in the alternative health business, most of them. In the back of my head, I mean, unconsciously, obviously, but when I just ask from my gut, it came up a lot. And I would even say, if I didn't only think it, I would say, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me, since it's not working, or since I'm experiencing this and that. And, okay, a spoiler alert, right? The what's wrong with me, that question, that assumption that something is wrong with me, it does come from a distorted perception, a filter. But this is not so useful to say to someone who has this as a foundation of her personality, that they're not welcome and in fact are bad and wrong. I mean, because I've spoken to so many healers and great personalities, wonderful people, I have heard this a lot, that you're perfect. There's nothing that needs fixing in you. You are exactly as you're supposed to be, and all of that. And it's very encouraging, thank you. But someone like me who would have that, and I'm saying it in the past tense, but of course it pops up, but it is in the past for me. It is in the past for me, because I've realized what I'm going to tell and share with you now. I would have, of course, doubt, and even disbelief, and even I can't even respect anything you say now, because I know you're wrong about that thing. So there's just not a match between where I'm at and where that message is coming from. Because I mean, I would love to engage in that, but the interviews are mostly, it never really was about so much about me that we went into it. But if I were to go into a dialogue about it, I would say, I know that you're not right about that, because there's so much evidence here that's all of this is really wrong with me. And if there was no feeling in me that something is wrong, then why would I be speaking to you? That's another question, right? That's another layer of this. Like, something has to propel us into change, okay? So, at the same time, what I felt was off in me was what I had been conditioned to. This is what I have come to realize, that it's actually what I have been conditioned to be, what we can call survival strategies or working models of the world, so that we identify with, or that we project into the world. It's based on what we have received from the environment. For example, how dysregulated our nervous system has become through early trauma, which will make us feel like there's something bad is going to happen, like there's a threat there. And I'm sure you know about the nervous system, and also if you don't know, I'm just not gonna go through it right now, because I would have to quote a bunch of people. It gets very technical for me, honestly, but I'm sure I'll be better at it one day. But you know, you recognize the different states you can be in, right? You can be relaxed, you can be excited, and for me, I've been throughout my life either in complete collapse or in a very excitable state. And it's really interesting with that over-excitability in me, because I am. It's not that many years ago. I think it was in 2018, 17 or 18, something like that. I interviewed someone, and I was excited, as I usually am. I had gone to somewhere in Copenhagen where she was at. She had flown in from, a little further away in Denmark, and I was excited. I had waited for her. I was like, all up in a high field, and she was like, "Oh, this is not good." And that was the first time where where that side of me got pointed out. Like, she pointed out that something in that high energy is actually, it's not helpful at all. And when she said that, I immediately knew that she was speaking truth. I felt, yeah, that's right. I mean, it made me question a lot of things, but it was like, this is something that's really been applauded by the culture, to be always ready and go and excited, and but actually there was a disconnect there. There's a disconnect, and it's not until like a few years ago that I've rediscovered my stomach. Like, I had many times been to several events where they would say, relax your stomach and all of that, but I had not realized how tense it actually is. I had not connected it somehow, and I was not connected to it. So I guess you can relax in a superficial way. I don't know, but it went deeper. So there was something truth in what she was saying about that overexcited puppy dog energy that was actually a sign for me of a disconnect. Yeah, when I think about it, it has two sides to it. I don't know. If she had pointed something out in me that was very positive, I would not have believed it. So, I mean, I have this experience that now that I tell the story, I'm like, yeah, I knew it. I knew she was speaking the truth. But this suspicion inside of me about that something is not right, that might very well be related to the trauma response that we're talking about today, the feeling that what is wrong with me, okay? So I might even, have, I don't know which is which, It might be because I sensed that it was true, and I do think it is, but it might also come very easy to me to question myself like that, because I did have that general foundation of feeling wrong. So it's easy. Like if I look back on my life, I cannot remember any time that someone has criticized me and I've just been really like standing up for myself and saying no. I mean, yeah, in recent years, in the last couple of years, yes, but longer back, okay, that's up. We are not gonna figure that one out, but let's go back to the nervous system here. So maybe you can recognize yourself in an imbalance between the two branches of the autonomic nervous system you have the autonomic nervous system. This is the basic. This is what I can say. And then anything more technical than this, I'm going to use some quotes. Another day. But just like we have the autonomic nervous system, there's two branches. There's a parasympathetic and there's a sympathetic nervous system. And when there's an imbalance between the two, we can experience all sorts of physical symptoms from that dysfunction. And for myself, I was easy to scare as a child, like someone would come and scare me because it was so fun for them with my reaction. It was absolutely not fun for me. And I also fainted easily, which could also be a symptom. I also have IBS. And this is just like really common, and I think they're accepted. Who am I to know? But I think they're like accepted symptoms. But then when you go into like trauma literature, of course, there's a lot more. It could also be other physical symptoms that you might have, like migraines or like diabetes. What's really interesting is also, I think, the emotional dysregulation. Not that it's, we can never separate them. But that would be more around your sleep being affected, your mood being affected, your irritability, your memory, your ability to take in information. And all of that is based on the stress response impact on your body and on how energy flows throughout your body, because the nervous system is set up to either like contract you or mobilize you when there is that high arousal of threat, that you need to do something about it. But then when that threat can either be chronic or that threat can be experienced before the brain and the nervous system and the musculature was developed. And so that will tend to shut us down somehow, keep us frozen or contracted. So I'm just saying, in terms of this feeling that something is wrong with you, well, if you're dysregulated, that is kind of also a feeling that just reinforces what you were told, or you were shown, or you were sensed into as a small child. And with early trauma, you also have oftentimes your energetic boundaries ruptured, or maybe your energetic boundaries around you never formed as it should, and that makes you feel raw, and it makes you feel easy to overwhelm. So you can feel the emotions of others, and it's really uncomfortable to be in a group or in a crowd, because it's like everything's just flooding into you. And this, of course, relates to being an adult and having difficulties setting limits, having difficulties having a sense of no, having a sense of self, and to feel high arousal easily. When an energetic boundaries are compromised, we can feel crazy. Do you know this feeling? I'm like, if you're a woman and you would listen to a podcast like this, I would think that you would have had that experience throughout your life at some point, feeling of being crazy or being boxed for being too sensitive. Again, it must just be me. It's just all inside my head. But yeah, but that's really what other people will tell you, and they will not hesitate to diagnose you with something, because then it's easier for them maybe to understand. Yeah. So you see, the question, what's wrong with me, has deep roots, but it has deep roots because it can be like a generational trauma, let's say it is. But then it becomes reconfirmed if our life is stressful, or our identities make us disown parts of ourselves, and we get caught in what we can call disorganization. So I'm talking about what happened to you as a young child, maybe still in the room, maybe not in the room yet, but the effects is in the adult life, the systemic dysregulation. It also disrupts our capacity for social engagement, which again leads to many issues in life. If you can't really connect with other people, and the feeling of not belonging, being rejected, not being lovable, and all of this wrong is just being confirmed again and again. But I just want to just cut in here for my own monologue. I just want to offer a reflection here as we speak about these things that can be difficult to even think about. I want to really relate empathetically here to myself. And I hope you can do it to yourself. I'm of course also relating empathetically to you. I think that is the same thing. We are so interconnected, okay? But what I used to do when I realized that I had perceived something totally false, like, let's say I would remember this is how I did with my kids, and now I found out that's not what I should have done. And even in this case, like, this has been in my head for so long that I was wrong, and I've missed out on so much because I felt inadequate, and I took so many choices out of that. So what will happen when I realized something was I would lapse into this self-resenting response, guilt-ridden, hopeless, just like attacking myself for not knowing better. But today, I empathize with my younger self, and I know that mistakes are there to be examined and not to bring me suffering in the moment, in the now. And I've been working in social work, and I still am, and in the business of healing, either through yoga, astrology, coaching, and now recently therapy too. When I've had these interactions with people, I've been confronted with my own self-criticism, because that kind of self-attack, self-resentment, and being filled with guilt, it has a directly impact on your capacity to show up for other people's emotional needs. So I've definitely been confronted in meeting others, all of that pain, and then like observing what are my mechanism, what happens to me, and I've been needing to take care of myself in terms of that. So I'm just going to invite you to do that as we speak about these things, that when you relate to your younger self, and you had this idea that something was wrong with you, that you understand that was a survival mode and not something that needs to be really criticized now. So back to early life associations, pre-verbal messages, the things that you could sense as a baby that later became emotional memories from before the brain is developed and before you're able to express and to understand what happens. I remember that Oprah, the queen, talked about that it could operate on the vibration or tone in the home, or the feeling that something is off. But I quite like that, the operating on the vibration or tone. So really before the words kicked in and the whole understanding conceptually. So, and I'm all in about, I'm all for generational trauma, epigenetics, and all of that. But I'm going to make a little switch here, because what if these traumas could be carried across death in such a way, as I spoke about in introducing evolutionary astrology, where the unconscious impact the present existence. So trauma carried across death and impacts what you are being born into in this life. And this is where it's really intriguing to combine, the philosophy of trauma and the knowledge we have about trauma with astrology. And so this is just the first episode, okay, so I'm not entirely sure how to do this yet. But it is the idea that we in this podcast, we take some real issues and dive into some astrology, because as a general rule, we know that the solar system reflects the human mind. Problem is that you're gonna have all the archetypes in order to really have the wholeness. You can't just take one, and that makes it complicated to ever say anything about anything, because you're only gonna be speaking about a part. But just so we know that it's only a part, I will dive in to speak about the archetype of Scorpio, Pluto, and the 8th house. To me, it's the same. There's differences between astrologers, how we use it. Some care a lot about the differences, and the tradition that I come from does not. So there's, of course, difference. You can say one is the motivation, another is the player, and the house is where. And so you can do all of that, but it doesn't make... I think in this podcast, at least in the beginning, I'm not going to be speaking so specifically into anything. I'm going to be speaking about archetypes. So let's visit that. Let's visit Pluto, Scorpio, 8th house archetype, which is a symbol that will take us to all our issues, basically, all our traumas, our scars, okay? And Steven Forrest even uses the word evil. Steven Forrest, the king. I will actually, I'm just going to read what he says, because it's really good. I'm going to read from page 3 on his book on Pluto. What shall we call that aspect of Plutonian reality? Turbulent waters here. For our purposes in this book, it will be essential to name the dimensions of life and not flinch from it. I choose to use a dangerous word, one with a lot of bad history. When in our freedom and without compelling moral reasons, we elect to create pain in other beings, I name it evil. You can call it error if you prefer, a misguided energy, or even God's mystery. But children are being abused, women are raped, young men 5 years past puberty are slammed into uniforms and tricked into murdering each other. These are realities, and they demand a name. We need not fall into the old unconscious thinking which would have us drunk with fury on the notion of evil, forgetting the humanness of those who perpetrate it. But we need not fall into the new unconscious thinking either, with its proclivity for pretending that no such realities exist. Thus, life's catastrophic experiences and the evil aspects of human nature weave together to produce a complex Plutonian whole. Where Pluto lies in the birth chart, we will be confronted with those difficult truths. And when Pluto passes through sensitive zones of the chart, they will rise up in our hearts and in our circumstances. What we do with them is our own business, and perhaps the purest measure of our spirituality. And then page 5 here. The unconscious mind and the repressive mechanism that governs and defines it have a curious property. They work automatically. We are never guilty of repression. It simply happens. Consciously choosing not to think about a threatening, embarrassing, unpleasant fact is a common enough human reality, but the right name for that behavior is suppression. It is entirely distinct from the subject we are considering. Here is the critical psychological point. The human unconscious is capable of holding difficult material outside of conscious awareness until such time as the psyche is sufficiently mature for that material to be integrated. One comment. As we will discover, the only guarantee built into the system is that if we've lived wisely and lovingly enough, we may be able to absorb these difficult energies further down the road. If we've done nothing with our lives but study a television screen, there are harsher possibilities. From the astrological viewpoint, let's add another critical notion. The ripening of the unconscious mind and our potential readiness to integrate wounded aspects of ourselves is signaled by Plutonian triggers. And then it gets a little bit technical, but again, I'm not sure where you are in your astrological learning, but just like the triggers are through, where the planets are now, or how they are affecting our current life. Okay, so that was a lot. What is this archetype about, and why is it that I think it's suitable? I mean, again, it's where all our issues are, and if we were to do nothing, like you said, with our life, is like if we would just accept that wound to be there and not let it lead us to anything else, then I think this feeling of being bad, if you have had it, it's not for everyone to have it, obviously, but I think a lot of people with developmental trauma has had it, the feeling of being wrong, then that's gonna stick if we do nothing. So, but Pluto, I'm gonna interchangeably say Pluto and Scorpio. I think I can't help that, but I'm gonna start out by saying Pluto. So Pluto is really about forming relationship. It's about connection and also separation. Yeah, I'm gonna take you through it, and then maybe in the end we can try and piece it together with some of the pieces in the beginning here. Pluto belongs to the third quadrant in the zodiac wheel. There's 4 quadrants. I'm going to keep referring to that, so don't worry about it if you haven't heard it before. But there's this zodiac wheel, and this quadrant is about needing more than what you have. So Pluto is how the soul grows. We feel a lack where Pluto is in our chart. This is the wound. This is because there is a wound, there'll tend to be bad health here, feelings of rejection and a lot of pain. And for that reason of lack, there's also an urgency for change. So change, like Pluto, is the symbol of evolution, because growth is a function of lack. Pluto is about survival. A lot of people know that Pluto is related to death, but not your own, at least physical death. It's actually about survival. With Pluto, there is a constant rebirth, a constant evolution of the emotional body. That's the intention anyway. So emotional body is quite common to talk about it in evolutionary astrology, but just for a quick definition, or maybe not a real definition, but just like trying to relate it to some normal therapy words, I would say that it's around embodiment. It's not just knowing, it is getting it in there, embodied, attached, and even fused with it. With what? What am I talking about? Well, that depends. Sometimes it's a partner, if we talk about relationships, right? But sometimes it's something else that you want, like a wisdom tradition. If you're studying some fellowship, whatever it is you really care about, you get it attached and you fuse until you actually become it. So that's more around what the emotional body is, and it's through that you grow. It's through the emotional body that you grow in consciousness, and that you then gain a larger capacity for a hardship. A larger resilience, basically. So with Pluto, we are confronted with what ends up driving us to that change, okay? So before the change, we have to confront, I would say maybe the change is already there, when we are confronted with shadows, confronted with our weaknesses, because something, and this is where death comes in Pluto, something about you, about your life is exhausted, saturated, completed, and needs to die, or has died. So this is where we have reached the limits of our own power and need more. So you need to look at the shadows. For example, where is it that I don't say no when I actually mean no? That's a classic, right? Why is it I don't trust myself so that other people can just persuade me to whatever? Why am I feeling so disconnected from my body? And all of these questions that we also get around, this self-inquiry that we go into when we study something like therapy. And then transformation is another keyword for Pluto. So you pour yourself over something that brings you power. It could be money, it could be information, it could be beauty. It depends on your value system, really. Look at what house Pluto is in your chart, and you'll have an idea about what your priority is. So you commit to that, you're determined and focused, and you attract what you want. Hopefully you magnetize it. And then something again is not working. There's more shadows, more things has come up. So you see now the limitations of what you're doing again, and you feel demons is eating at you, and you just want more. And this might be your true self that's coming up. There's different explanations for that, but let's say you're in a relationship when this happens, and you wonder, but I thought that is the partner that I wanted, and now you feel the temptation to be unfaithful because you need more. And of course it's to be unfaithful is based on some old strategy to not take good enough care of you, because otherwise you would have been truthful about your needs, right? So, and Pluto is actually not gentle when something like that happens, but it is a common thing with Pluto, the temptation to not be truthful, where what it actually wants is the raw, honest truth, right? So when the opposite happens, there will be drama, there'll be hurt, there'll be feelings of betrayal, and it will send you back to that childhood wound. I'll assume that it is about abandonment. So that's so deep in Scorpio and in Pluto. So, but why are you not satisfied in the first place in the relationship? Why is that? And like I said, there's different explanations to that. Maybe you fused with this partner because of how you were conditioned. Maybe it was based on a survival strategy, so that's why it doesn't satisfy you in the long run. Or maybe just that the partner is not growing now, because he could have grown too, and like you could have had this growth together, since you are very affected by Pluto. That's just the archetype I'm describing. And if you are affected by Pluto, you can't settle for such a stagnant life. You can't just sit there with him on the couch every night. So either the partner develops with you, or you become stagnant. And that's just not an option if you're taking, if you're actually dealing with Pluto. You have to face the shadows, and you have to become truthful about what you need. And so again, the way out of crisis is to go into change, outgrow what you're in, develop deeper into what you really want for yourself now. So you evolve, and you're going to want something different. You're going to attract differently. So Pluto is really the resources to develop you and to redefine you many times as your emotional body integrates the resources. Now, Pluto is also about trust, because it relates so much to this fusion with the other. And the Pluto archetype will experience rejection and will reject, rejection and attraction. So maybe you are being rejected, and maybe you are doing the rejection of those who are into you, because they are attracted. They're attracted to people who represent power and will open new doors for them and make you become what you are not yet. And when you are really wanting that energy of the other, and it's easier in a way to talk about it with a partner, and that is very common, but I'm just making the point that it could also be some kind of work field or whatever, like politics, something that you care about, that you wanted to fuse with. And you have to be also a match to that you want to fuse with. So if we are, let's talk about a partner, right? So are you a fit for this energy that compels you to the other? Do you have something that this partner needs? If not, then you're gonna be rejected. And but I need someone to take me up. And so that's the issue of human to human, like conditional selective love. You need to go to a space where you have something to offer, something to exchange. It's very conditional love. We're not at Neptune yet. We're not at the Pisces yet. So if there's not a match for you, you might be inspired to work on yourself so that you become a match to what you want. But so of course it can also happen in a relationship. It doesn't have to be that you break up every time you have a crisis. Not at all. You can be in a relationship for a lifetime, of course, also with this archetype. But it is about sharing all your insecurities. And in Scorpio, it's actually sharing your insecurities with a stranger, or at least someone who's new to you. It's about daring greatly and just about everything that Brené Brown is talking about. Whoop. It's so Scorpio, so Scorpio. So vulnerability in Scorpio means that they have to develop the psychology skills as part of their survival kit in relationships, where they really stand for loyalty and are really present and determined to be there. But of course, there's no promise. It is a risk. It is about daring greatly, because there is no promise that you won't get hurt, and that's a Pluto thing, to take risks emotionally. And it might lead, the relationship might lead to defeat and loss and feelings of abandonment again, because life is sometimes like that, but also because Pluto wants to develop your ability to analyze and to be more discriminative, so that you learn from the mistakes and you become more diligent in your patterns of choosing partners. When you are in that power, then you become really attractive. You choose who you want, and you don't have to settle for someone who's not giving you much. A Scorpio Plutonian person in his power would rather be alone than settling for a relationship for the practical reasons, because you'll need someone who is self-aware and open to explore his own vulnerabilities in order to really form that deep bond. Okay, so I hope that we've gone full circle now. So it's really about forming that deep bond, the connection, but also separating from when it's actually not true for you. And so you start to choose differently through these cycles of rejection and attraction and magnetizing into what you want. So you start to choose differently, and you are re-empowered. So with the cycle, this Pluto cycle is to react to what's not working in your life, basically, to the weaknesses, to the shadows, like we read in Steven Forrest, like the unconscious is gonna come up when you're ready, and then you'll be empowered. And then when you reach the limit of that, well, maybe you're gonna find out that, okay, I placed all this value on my beauty. I'm gonna need something that's not, that's gonna be more sustainable. And so it goes through life lessons. But of course you can have the same partner, I want to say that, and you can also be in the same wisdom tradition, or whatever it is you have merged with. You can be in that for a lifetime. It doesn't have to be that you find different things, because it is a fixed sign. So, but from a Scorpio or Plutonian perspective, you will have to ask the question, at least, if you're still on the same page, so there's not a gap between you and your partner. The partnership needs to be magnetized, to be like just this full completion together, the shared values, and then also the sense that you can keep growing and not be compromised in your own development, but that the partner continually helps you grow instead. Yeah, okay, so that's what I was planning to tell you about this archetype, and now I'm stuck with a blank page because I've not really made any conclusion. So should we just try and thread it a little bit together here? I mean, it's like there's this understanding, but it's not exactly the same language for it. But if we were to like completely fail the Plutonian intention, and that's how it is in astrology, there's like the higher intention and there's the lower version. There's the intention from the universe. This is why that you're going through these trials, for example, and then there's like, oh, but this is what happens if you just stay in the room and you don't believe in yourself and you're just like being in that completely restricted and limited place. So yeah, if you were to stay there, then yeah, everything was going to be really sad, and the answer to the question of what is wrong with me would be everything, right? But I like, to put the Scorpio archetype together with the question of what is wrong with me, because it is, I don't even want to say twofold, it's many-folded. Like it's a distorted perception. We agree on that. There's nothing wrong with you. There's honestly not. And I'm so sorry for anyone who's had this experience as I had for so many years, to think that I was just like the black sheep and feeling like all of these projections of other people onto me, of because like they didn't understand me and I was the odd one out, and then I was just bad, being different, being bad, and being like the one who could never figure anything out, all of that. All of that. I feel really sad and compassionate towards others who's gone through that. It's not accurate, and it's about the environment, it's about the other people. It's not to do with you. And in order to not lose attachment to them and relationship with them, to the environment, maybe it's not like concrete persons who's told you this. Often clients will say, but they didn't tell me that. No, but just like think about again the tone and the vibration in the home, and what had been carried through generations maybe. And so it came into you somehow, if that was your life experience. So it had to do with that, the environment and the past and all of that, and not you. So it's not you. So it is distorted. That's the one side of it. And then there's the other side, and there are many other sides too. But let's just take two. Okay, the other side is if you did not feel any need to grow. This is like the most sad thing ever. I mean, it's good that you've had this sense, oh, I want to change something. And I guess now just saying it out loud, I'm thinking, if you completely accepted bad, like permanent bad, you're bad, then would you even look for change? Like if you didn't believe you could change? Just thinking about that right now. So it's actually, maybe it's a strategy who's taken you to therapy, to whatever healing modality you've gone to, because a strategy that I want to fix myself. There's something wrong with me, but at least you're there, rather than not having any hope that anything could be changed ever. That's death, right? And we're gonna be speaking, I think, in one of the not so far away chapters, we're going to be speaking about suicide ideation. So it's not that I'm a stranger to that either at all, but just saying that's the feeling of something that is wrong with you can actually be used for good. Yeah, how about that conclusion? I like that. Happy end, we like that, right? Like a romantic movie. Okay, yeah, I think I'm gonna end there. Maybe just one last comment is, because I think I said something around this in the beginning of the pilot one. When you look for a healer, a therapist, someone to help with, what would come up for me, because of my traumatic background, if you don't mind me calling that, what would come up is the question, who is able to bear this even? Because when you have this perception that you're the wrong one, it's very closely, what's very close is, oh no, I'm also gonna burden someone else, and it's just like the whole body is just so sunk into the feeling of badness. And like, I'm just even trying to get better, I'm just gonna contage someone else, I'm gonna burden someone else. So, and especially, I guess, my adoption story, but even more than that, the suicide ideation, people get really scared about that. Not people, but experts get really scared about that. And I've only tried once, actually, a therapist that was not overwhelmed by my suicide ideation when I was actually in it, like in such a collapse. She was very nervous the next day, actually. She had to call her supervisor, and she had to tell me all these things that, you have to tell a person who's talking about suicide. So it's understandable. All of it is understandable. But I just wanted to mention that I got such a wonderful feeling for one moment in time, because I felt that day in the session, not the day after, but in the session, that she could bear it. And there was so much healing in that. So I guess I'm just saying that all of this Plutonian crisis and all of the cycles that you go through where, you realize this is not working, looking at my shadows again, and then redefining yourself. It is actually when you go through that, the highs and the lows of life, I think that your capacity grows to help other people and to bear and to hold what we have to hold for each other as therapists, but just as humans, just as friends, really. We also have to have the capacity and the ability to listen. And so I think it's partly because you've gone through that, and then partly because you're able to take care of yourself in the now. And that relates to the Scorpio signature, the symbolism of your needs, that like you need more, right? So if you don't go with that calling, stagnation, just staying in the wound. You really, in the Scorpio archetype, the Plutonian archetype, you absolutely need to go with the call for more growth and more overcoming of your limitations. So, yeah. Okay, I don't know if that was a great end, but it's just a thought I have. And I'm going to keep sending out the thoughts that I have to you in these chapters. And I'll be very grateful if you'll share some of your thoughts with me in an email. And there is a place to call whole. And I hope you stay heartful. Until next time.